you guys, welcome back to the desk corner. Welcome to a long overdue video. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I painted this watercolor portrait, and it's my first real portrait with watercolors. I'll be honest with you guys, I have been on this sort of journey trying to learn watercolor for the past year or so now, and I decided it was time to challenge myself and try an actual portrait in this medium. And it's a very interesting journey. I wanted to take you guys along with me. Before we get started, I do want to mention the earrings are the only exception to this piece, the only area that is not finished yet. There's a reason for that I'm not going to tell you in this video. Okay, I realize that was maybe a little bit confusing for me to say. You guys, this took me an inexplicably long amount of time to finish. Let's go ahead and rewind a few weeks when I first got started on this portrait. So this is my first real attempt at a watercolor portrait. Yesterday I sketched out this really beautiful sketch. As you guys can see, I liked this picture because this girl's at an angle and her hair is up. There's a flower in her hair as well. There's a lot of like little details here that I can focus on as I'm painting, and I've got my Sennelier watercolors. I even cleaned my palette too so that we could be all fresh and ready for this video. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm very nervous and also excited about how this is going to go. Of course, I decided to start with the eyes as I normally would approach any portrait this way to sort of make the painting come to life a little bit before I started building up around it. I was so nervous about messing up because I am not quite as handy with a brush as I am with a pencil, and I can be a little bit clumsy with a paintbrush. You also need to worry about preserving your highlights ahead of time too. The next challenge I had was mixing a skin tone and mixing different colors in order to create what I thought would be a realistic and healthy looking, like, vibrant skin tone. And this was very difficult for me because I'm not used to mixing paint to create skin tones, and so my first layers were just awful, and I really did not like how it was looking so far. I mean, they really were awful, and I wasn't sure whether it was better to start out really light and build up, or if my first layers were too light. But now looking back on it, I really think that starting out light and building up was the best way to go, because I did end up with a nice looking vibrant skin tone in the end. But let me tell you guys, in these stages that you're seeing right here, I was not sure what I was doing one bit, and I didn't really have any confidence that this skin tone would ever kind of look how I wanted it to. I was also trying to be really careful to blend it out to avoid harsh edges in certain areas. I was okay with there being some harsh edges depending on the area, but I wanted to make sure that there was a soft blend as well. And there is going to be a very harsh lighting change in a moment as I switch to my overhead lights, which for some reason weren't on before, and I decided to take a break from working on the face area and decided to go back to working around the eyes. And even this was a little bit scary, honestly, because of all those detail areas. I didn't want to mess anything up, especially because it's so hard once you add something to then erase it with watercolor. I then got the courage to go ahead and cover the rest of the face in a base layer. And yes, the colors look quite like patchy, not well mixed together, and very transparent here, but that was okay. I just wanted something to build upon, like a visual map of where certain tones were going to go, where the highlights would be, and things like that. There was a bit of blush on her cheek, so I wanted to make sure I made her cheeks look rosier than I normally would. And then I started to add the second and third layer, and this is where things started to go wrong, and there is a moment I was ranting here that I had to just cut out from the video for the greater good, because this was very much the ugly stage of the painting where everything looked so patchy and the colors looked all wrong and the tone looked wrong. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's so hard to get past this stage of a painting or an artwork. You know, you just have to push through it. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and slow down so I can show you guys how I painted the lips with my really small, I think, size 2 round brush. And I was just being so careful here. I didn't really want to overdo it. I wanted to make sure that the lips looked soft and not too harsh and cartoon-like, if that makes sense. And so I was being really, really careful and light in my initial layers here. But as many of you know, with watercolor you have to work somewhat fast so that you're able to work before the paint dries, and because of that I was, I guess, not rushed, but a little bit worried about, like, you know, not finishing an entire area before moving on to the next area, which isn't the way I work with colored pencil. So that's a big difference too when you're switching from something like colored pencil, dry media, to something like watercolor, where there's a bit more time sensitivity and you do definitely have to focus on one area at a time. So think of this as the very base layer, and now we're going to build upon that and start defining her features a bit more. So I started with the nose here, and then I continued around the lips and the eyes, and just sort of tried to build upon those base layers that I had created the same way I would do with colored pencil. Of course, I was trying to be careful here because with some of the features, I wanted to make sure I was using my detail brush and not too much water, or else I would get something that was way too loose. And that's where it's difficult with watercolors. When you're trying to actually create some detail areas, then you actually do have to be pretty careful with your paintbrush. That's how I felt while I was doing like the nose and the lips area. I was just a little bit nervous about messing up, but it turned out okay. Let's go ahead and slow it down again for a moment so I can show you guys how I added layers and kind of like rendered her eye, because this part was really challenging for me and I had to work very slowly with my smaller detail brush. I just wanted to make sure that as I was adding some of those darker areas to the pupil, or I mean the iris, I wasn't accidentally getting rid of any highlights that I meant to keep, and I wanted my colors to still look like they're blended together naturally. And when you're working on such a small area like the iris here, it can be really difficult. So I was trying to make sure I didn't add too much water to my paintbrush that would kind of just have me lose control of the paint. And one aspect of watercolor I have not gotten used to is losing control of the paint, especially working in detail areas. That effect can be nice when you're working on larger areas where you want the effect to be loose, but then when you have to hone in on those details, it becomes a bit challenging, I'm not going to lie. After I worked on her iris, I went ahead and lined the top of her eye, and you have to make sure you don't put too much water when you're trying to create a darker area or line, because then it's going to be way too transparent. So I built up enough color here that it looked more opaque, which is how I intended it to be, so that it would stand out and actually look a bit more realistic as well. But oh my gosh, it is scary working with super opaque paint like this in a small detail area. I have to say, especially because I had black mixed in with brown here so that her eyeliner would look dark enough. And that little inner corner, oh my goodness, you guys, I was just very nervous working on this part. We are past the ugly stage officially, and we're getting more into the final rendering process of the face, where there are just some areas that need to be worked on a little bit more, and, you know, some areas that need more details added, but besides that, her face has come to life a lot more and the skin tone is a bit more vibrant. Her features are popping out a little bit more. So we're not quite done with the face, but we're getting there. We're closer to the end than we are the beginning, which was a relief for me. It very much was a relief for me, but then I realized that there was another challenge that lay ahead of me, which was her hair. This big mass of hair that she had up in a messy bun so that a lot of her curls were kind of loose and hanging out around her face. I was so intimidated by this, so I started out just going in like I normally do with a very light, transparent base layer that would just show me the outline of where everything was supposed to go. I also realized that she was a floating head at this point, so I went ahead and started working on the skin tone for her neck and ear, because I didn't want her to remain a floating head until the end of the painting, because that would be weird. But I don't think there's a need to really slow down anything here, because I'm just doing the same sort of build-up that I did on her face. And I was trying to match the skin tones as best as I could and mix the colors as best as I could whenever I would run out of paint, which is another challenge that I face when using watercolor, but at least it's easy to reuse paint that dries on your palette just by reactivating it with water, compared to acrylic where it's kind of a nightmare to remix colors when you need to, since they completely dry and they're unusable after a while. As I go in to do the second layer for the hair, I'm just using a lot less water, and I want the final result to be very dark brown, almost black, which is why I'm already going in pretty dark here and starting to create just a darker hair color. I'm not sure if I really went about this the right way or if I got the right undertones in her darker hair that I wanted to, but that's okay. I think at least I learned a little bit about how to render hair with watercolor, even though this was really challenging for me, you guys. The hair was definitely the most difficult part for me, especially because I even struggle doing hair with colored pencil or graphite, so just in any medium I seem to struggle with it, to be totally honest. I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out as I go ahead and do the same thing over the rest of her hair, just adding that second layer in, deepening up the value here, and just trying to figure out what direction different clumps of hair were going in, because it was kind of challenging. And then it was time for me to go ahead and work on our third layer here, which was a lot darker, and I'm not really sure if I achieved the right tone that I was going for here, as I was moving more toward a dark brown than an actual black hair look, but that's okay. I think that it still works even if it doesn't match the reference photo entirely. I think my camera went out of focus a bit for this part. I'm so sorry, you guys, if you noticed that or if that bothers you here, but yeah. And the forehead, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on with the forehead. Like, what? Where are those curls even coming from? I don't know, you guys. Hopefully I was able to kind of like blend this in enough so that you couldn't tell that I didn't know what I was doing with the hair, but it ended up looking like pretty messy. That's okay. There were a lot of flyaways in the photo. I think I added more like obvious flyaways in the painting compared to the photo. What a big knotted mess her hair looks like it's in, honestly. My painting skills need some work with this particular type of subject matter, you guys. But I was trying to work around that little flower in her hair too to make sure I didn't get that dirty or anything, since it's a very pink flower. Now here's the fun part. We're going to work on even more flyaways. Happens to be my favorite part of working on a hair drawing or painting, just any artwork involving hair in general. I love adding in all those flyaways, but it was really challenging for me to do that with a paintbrush. I was trying to be careful, and I still ended up with some that were way too like thick because of the way I held the paintbrush as I was trying to create the strands. Oh my gosh, it's so challenging. If anyone has any tips on how to do this with a paintbrush, let me know, because I am here to learn, honestly, you guys. I think it will take me way more practice to be able to master this. That being said, there were a lot of hair strands that did turn out the way I wanted them to, and oh my gosh, you can even see me pausing in between to try to figure out where the hair strands are going to go individually. And this is sped up just a teeny bit, so it's even a little bit faster than how I was actually painting in real time, you guys. But it would be painfully slow if I slowed it down that much for the video. I even tried to use the tip of the brush to create some strands that were lighter and less obvious than others, and others that seemed more like actual clumps of hair. And then of course I wanted them to go in different directions, and she does have curly or wavy hair, so I wanted to make sure it looked that way too. And let's take a quick little diversion, and I'm going to work on her eye again, which looked a little bit light in contrast in comparison to the hair. So that's what I like about working on different areas and then jumping around, because you could see how something looks in contrast to another area, and then you could figure out if you need to adjust it at all. I know that some artists prefer to just fully finish one area then move on to the next, and it looks a little bit more neat like that in video form, but oh my gosh, you guys, I will never be able to do that, so I am so sorry. I'm just going to speed it up a little bit more as I go ahead and finish the rest of the hair, because I'm doing the same exact thing, just adding in some more extra clumps of hair and flyaway strands, especially under the flower there. I almost forgot about those ones. And then of course up on the bun I had to make sure that looked a little bit more real by adding some flyaways as well. And this part took so much longer than I ever thought it would. I might have even overdone it a little bit, but I do like how it looks in the end. It has a nice emphasis on her hair. And I've actually failed to mention up until this point that the girl in the reference photo has freckles, so of course this had to be the most fun part maybe of the whole painting. I know I said the hair was, but the freckles for some reason I found to be really, really fun, just as fun as it looked me painting them on camera. And then we can move on to the flower. And when we move on to the flower, I have to say I don't really know if I got the look I was going for here. I think I was a little bit tired at this point, and I didn't really make this flower look quite as realistic as perhaps I should have, so I don't really know if it actually matches up to the rest of the painting. I tweaked it a little bit more off camera, so the footage you guys are seeing right now is a good proportion of it, but I tweaked it a little bit more, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you guys the end result after this, since I don't have some of that very final footage in the end, because I did fix some of the hair around the flower too and made it look a little bit more like it was part of the photo, and matched it to the color of the blush on her cheeks, of course, as well, so that we have nice like color consistency here. Alright you guys, here is the finished portrait, which you saw at the beginning, but I thought I would show you again now. I made a few final touches on the flower, added some hair over it. I'm still not too happy with that flower though. I think my favorite part was the face. I really like how her face and skin tone turned out here, but I'm not really sure if I like the flower as much, and the hair is alright. I could have done a better job, but it still looks pretty good, I have to say. So here's that final portrait. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you are a watercolor artist and you have some tips for me for watercolor portraits, let me know, because I am very eager to learn more and I'm excited to tackle another project like this in the future, but maybe not quite yet. I think I'm gonna need a break from longer projects now, because this one took me quite a while to finish. Before I let you guys go, I just wanted to mention I do have my Patreon still up as a tip jar where you could choose the amount you would like to support me with if you want to. Of course, that is something that you can change and edit as well, but I do have a library of real-time videos on there. I will be posting in the future as well, but as of now I'm using it a little bit more like a little tip jar feature. Since I've been so busy, it's been hard to even keep up with my YouTube channel recently, as many of you have noticed. So that does function as a little way to support me if you would like to, and also of course just watching my videos here, subscribing and leaving a comment does wonders for me as well. So let me know what you guys request me to do next with watercolor. I think I might take a break from that and do something else for the next couple of videos, but I'm curious what you'd like to see me tackle next. Thanks so much for watching, and of course, as always, I will see you in the next video. Hopefully it'll come a little bit quicker than this one did. Bye you guys. I thought it would be fun to show you in a little post-credit scene how dirty my palette got since I showed you that clean clip at the beginning. I don't really like to wipe my palettes clean after a painting because watercolor can be reactivated, and I hate to waste any of these very expensive paints, so I might find the use for these colors in the future, especially maybe this darker brown or black color, and hopefully I won't have to wipe the palette clean because I really dislike doing that even though it's so satisfying. Alright, that's it for now.